Welcome, legal trailblazers. We are excited to bring you episode 6 of The Global Lawyer, a podcast designed to foster a friendly peer-to-peer environment where lawyers from different jurisdictions can come together, exchange ideas, and engage in insightful discussions. This initiative is proudly hosted by the São Paulo Lawyers Institute as part of the celebrations for its 150th anniversary, marking a century and a half of advancing the legal profession in Brazil and beyond. We aim to create a space where language barriers dissolve and legal minds from all over the world can interact openly and confidently. Today's episode continues that tradition with more dynamic conversations that push the boundaries of international legal practice. So let's dive right in because today we have a very special guest, Gillian Harrison, a long-standing and dear friend of mine who has carved out an incredible and impressive career path. She is a lawyer trained in the UK in both common law and civil law. She's going to tell us more about that, which gives her a truly global perspective on the legal profession. But that's not all. She is also the CEO of Whitefox Technologies, a leading company driving innovation in biofuel engineering within the energy sector. Whitefox provides cutting-edge solutions for all types of alcohols, biofuels, and renewable chemicals across the United States, Canada, Europe, and South America. Her expertise and leadership are second to none, and I couldn't be more thrilled to have her here with us today. Gillian, my dear friend, welcome.
It's lovely to be here. Bom dia.
Bom dia. Okay, my first question has to be about your incredible transition from law to leadership. How did that journey begin for you? And how has your legal training and experience shaped your approach to the leadership position you hold now? Because you have practiced law for a while, right?
Yes, that's right. So as you mentioned, I studied English law and Spanish law in the UK. And then I began my training career and my legal career at Clifford Chance in the City of London, which some of your listeners, your audience will know is an international firm. An international that is very much part of who I am. I'm half English, half Spanish, and so I love language and culture. So I've always wanted a career that would allow me to go beyond the UK, which is where I was born. So I stayed at Clifford Chance for close to 10 years. During that time, I worked in the Madrid office. I also spent some time on secondment at the Royal Bank of Scotland, and I spent 2 years in São Paulo, where you are now.
Wow.
Very close to my heart. And so that experience gave me, obviously, the international side, but an understanding of different legal systems, different cultures, but importantly, in the context of your question, a good understanding of international business in different environments, very much in the energy sector. So a lot of the transactions that I was doing, I was mainly in the finance, but did a lot of project finance, oil and gas work, especially when I was in Brazil. Petrobras was my main client, so I spent a lot of time in Rio, which is a very privileged position to get to combine São Paulo and Rio. Couldn't be better. But that gave me a broad understanding of different legal regimes, different business dynamics in different markets. And I think what I grew to love during those close to 10 years was the diversity of the legal practice. But I was involved in, as you can imagine, transactions, and I was always intrigued by the business side. So whilst obviously my role was a lawyer, but very much a commercial role of getting deals done to the best interests of both sets of or all parties on a transaction. It was the business aspect that I was always kind of drawn to. So I think I got to the point in my career where, like many of us lawyers, you decide, okay, do you become a partner and really kind of decide that you're going to stay within the legal career. And whilst that obviously is a very attractive option, and those who decide that, I think it's a phenomenal profession, very exciting and dynamic. But for me, I felt that I wanted to be involved in something that would also allow me to hone the business side of what I was experiencing as a lawyer. One thing that stood with me was seeing something through. Legal is very transactional. You might do a phenomenal deal, come up with very interesting structures, which I love. Thinking structurally and trying to get the deal dynamics to work. But once you've signed the deal, you go on to the next one. And I was always left wondering, well, did the deal go ahead? Was it successful?
Yes.
Did they make anything? Did they do anything? And taking risk and decisions. And as you know, very much so, the legal role is not to be the decision maker, but to help your clients reach the right decisions, empower them to decide on their direction. But the lawyer, yourself, isn't the one making a decision. And for me, I was feeling there was something missing in being on the legal side alone, and I was kind of curious to really engage on the business side. So I think, and that may come from my family background. My parents have been entrepreneurs. My grandmothers ran their own businesses,
both
in England and Spain, and so business was always spoken about at the dinner table, both the risks and the challenges of business. So I think that the legal career gave me a fantastic background, but I kind of got to that point where I wanted to go into business, and that's sort of like the context, if you like. And then the challenge is, so what? What do you do about that? How do you then, as a lawyer, go into business? And no doubt we'll speak a little bit about that.
Yes, and that's what leads me to my next question, because you have to balance law and technology. In fact, as a CEO in the technology-driven energy sector, how do you balance your expertise in law with the technical aspects of running a company that focuses on advanced engineering solutions?
Well, I think for a number of years, probably, I thought it was, I guess, a really big gap of mine. Often I'm the only non-engineer in the room. But I suppose I've now got to the point of realizing it's in some ways a benefit. But the legal training of being the one who asks lots of questions, a good listener, a curious mindset, I think is what enabled me to get to enough comfort in the technology. So, the founder of Whitefox, Stefan Bloom, and I would spend many hours against a side of whiteboard with me asking lots of questions and him explaining and bringing it to life. So I think I've been good at asking questions, of our clients, of our engineers, of, our partners, and never being afraid that it might be a silly question, because maybe it's because I'm not the engineer. To me, it's just a question. I don't have enough technical background to assess if it's a silly question. I should know the answer. Yes, I'm curious. I ask lots of questions, and as a lawyer, I'm probably quite good at bringing ideas and concepts together. So sometimes I might be even with our development team in our lab or with our engineers and hearing different things that they're talking about. Sometimes I'm quite good at connecting them and going, well, have you thought about this? And I might bring a completely different perspective into the discussion, which actually I love, and I think leads to quite an enriching experience.
Yes, for them, it's a privilege to have you in. From this perspective, it's incredible, because you might have thought of things that didn't occur to them, right? And yes, and that's such a complex combination of skills. I imagine that this blend must really help in managing the various risks and legal frameworks involved in your sector. Can you tell us about the regulatory aspects and the risks involved, and how do you stay updated with a rapidly changing technology while ensuring compliance with industry regulations?
Interesting question. So from a risk perspective, you're right. Being able to balance, the legal side never leaves you. You're probably always still a bit of a lawyer, but having to make sure that you're a lawyer that's prepared to take risk and not too risk averse, right? Because otherwise you don't really make many decisions. So I think I'm good at making sure that I'm, I guess, well read and understand the detail of a situation before making a risk. And I think the way to achieve that is making sure you're surrounded by smarter people and engage with them to look at either the legal side. When we're going into Brazil, I might have worked in Brazil, but I'm certainly no expert in terms of establishing a company in Brazil. And that the tax regime is pretty complicated. And how do you actually transact from a financial perspective, getting paid, dollar, euro, real denomination. So there's quite a lot of different areas. So from my perspective, you get different experts, both internally at Whitefox. We have Peter, he's our in-house lawyer, who's actually also worked in Brazil. He worked in Rio. So we kind of have a good breadth of understanding. Our finance team, tax experts, you get the right experts around. And then I think my role is to assess all the different components of that go into taking risk or assessing risk. And then together with our board and our leadership team, balancing the risks and opportunities. But I think one of the things that we often say internally in our discussions is that to create value, you have to be almost by definition prepared to take risk. And sometimes the more risk you're prepared to take, the more value opportunity there is. But whilst always balancing, what if it goes wrong on the business, you've got to bear that in mind. From our perspective, the most of the risks are around, I guess, the technology rather than regulation. Our customers who are, for example, an ethanol producer, they certainly have to have a mind on the regulation relating to an industrial facility, air permits, obviously workers' rights and all sorts of different regulations that they have to bear in mind. They're making alcohol, so duties and controls around exporting alcohol are very strong. Health and safety. So they probably have a lot more than we have to consider, but we will engage with them because they'll often ask us for information so that they can assess their own regulatory requirements. But so we keep abreast of things. As I said, it really helps to have an in-house lawyer. So I rely very much on Peter to keep abreast of regulation that impacts us as a business. Which every country is a bit different, but we make sure that probably my legal background makes sure that we're always well advised from a legal perspective and bring in external lawyers when needed.
Definitely. And it's interesting to know that you have customers in Brazil, in South America, and you have also in the US, and the regulatory differences they play a major role as well, because Peter is here in Brazil, or Peter he's
in London,
supervise.
He's in London, but he worked in Rio for a few years, and in fact, his wife is Brazilian, so they speak Portuguese. Quite a few of us speak Portuguese in the business, and that really helps when doing business, and Spanish. So that really helps in doing business in South America.
Yeah, and the legal aspects, the changing places, the changing the jurisdictions that are different. So you must always be aware of the differences and have support in this sense. And now moving to the challenges and successes as a CEO, what have been the most rewarding and challenging aspects of leading Whitefox, Gillian, particularly in such a niche industry which is focused on sustainability and energy solutions? Tell us.
Gosh, the list is probably quite long. I think for me, one that comes to mind when you ask that question is successfully getting our technology into the US ethanol market. So when we first started to look at the US biofuels market in 2014 as an opportunity for us, together with some of my colleagues, we spent quite a lot of time, driving around the Midwest, speaking to producers, ethanol producers, and asking lots of questions. So we didn't start by going out there and trying to sell a product. We tried to understand the market need, and then to develop a solution and a product that we felt, well, one, to assess, is there a need that we can address?
A very clever approach and a very prudent one.
Yes, I would say in hindsight, yes, I agree. Maybe at the time you don't realize it, but now I would always advise any entrepreneur to start in that way, really understand the market before you just come with a product that you think they want to buy. And that enabled us to then develop a solution that we felt would address most of what they were aiming for in their long strategic goals, which are reduce energy, cut their costs, but make more ethanol at the same time. So make more ethanol by at the same time cutting their costs and their carbon footprint and reducing their water consumption. So those were kind of themes that we kept on hearing again and again. There are 200 ethanol plants in the US. So there was an opportunity that if we could develop a solution that, addressed those challenges that they were facing, then there should be a receptivity for it. But I think going to your question, that first probably 18 months, you kind of learn a lot, and then you develop a solution that you think addresses it. And then I think the big learning for me, and the huge challenge, is if you have a technology that's going into an industrial market, you are dealing with a conservative audience, especially one that comes from an agricultural background, which is the same in Brazil. It's a very conservative audience. They want the upside, but they don't want to take the risk themselves. So what I faced a lot was, well, it sounds great, who's doing it? And you say, well, we're doing it in Germany or in Spain, or we've been doing technology, we've been installing our technology in Europe, but the response was, no, who's doing it in the US? So it was a very quick learning that whatever we had done outside of the US wasn't really important to our US audience. They wanted to know who was doing it in the US. And so then you can imagine it's very difficult, because if your answer is every time, well, nobody yet.
No one.
First, nearly everybody said, well, that sounds great. Come back and talk to me when you've got a few installations, because we don't do first. We do second, third, fourth. That's when we come in. So it was a realization probably 2 years after we started to get into the market that was going to be a challenge. How would we find that first adopter? And I can tell you it was partly by speaking to a lot of producers, but being, I think, so the kind of key satisfaction point, you say, what was the challenge and what sort of satisfaction, was eventually finding that first producer. And ironically, it was in Hungary that moment happened. So speaking to an ethanol producer called Neil Kohler, who's from California, I got to know him quite well, and it was only really after 3 days of a conference. They said, so Gillian, what do you do? I've told you a lot about what I do. What do you do? And so then you kind of start the conversation, and he said, that's what I'm looking for. So who else is doing it? Your heart sinks and thinks, okay, here we go. My bubble is about to be deflated. But when he learned that nobody else was doing it, he was excited, because he said, great, because I love to be first. So that moment, fantastic. I had found my early adopter, and I think the lesson then was to be ready to go at pace and not let that go away. So It took a while to find an early adopter, but then once I knew that he was open, it was like, all right, I'm flying out to the US, and let's shake hands and move forward with this project, which we did. So I think sometimes those satisfactory moments are more satisfying when you know how difficult they are to win. So I think the challenge, I would say, was getting those first adopters in a very conservative market. And the satisfaction then is actually we did it. And now here we are with close to a 7% market share in the US. So long journey to get there, Definitely requires resistance and not being deflated every time you hear a no.
That's difficult. That's a difficult one.
It is difficult. It is difficult. And but then if you've got something that you've developed that you really believe in, that kind of keeps you going, and a good team around you. But having succeeded and now having a brand recognition as a non-US company in a conservative market is difficult, and so it's very satisfying to know that we've achieved that and that we're still growing.
Yes, and I can imagine that those challenges resonate with many of our viewers in leadership roles or aiming to those roles, especially in industries where sustainability is key, because something that is very important right now in the planet. Yeah. And how do you maintain a balance between the day-to-day operations and the long-term sustainability goals? I mean, in the company. Do you think about that in the long run, and how do you accommodate everything?
Do you mean the long-term sustainability for us as a business?
Yes, for you yes, for you as a business.
So we very much look at our own sustainability impact, both from in the full kind of ESG perspective. We've been going through our own journey over the last probably 18 months, educating ourselves as a team, as an organization, as to ourselves. So counting our carbon footprint, scoring ourselves against a framework. We decided to kind of measure ourselves against the B Corp framework, which you may be familiar with, but it doesn't really matter so much which one. The point is having a framework and learning what is our position today, and then learning how can we improve. And so we have a business that helps our clients be more sustainable, because we're all about saving energy and water and reducing carbon. So we know we're doing something good for our clients, but at the same time, we have to look internally at ourselves and put the mirror up to ourselves and make sure that the way in which we operate from a governance, a societal and environmental perspective is also as good as it can be. So yes, we've been on a learning journey internally, and then putting in place targets where we see we can continuously improve.
Right. And especially in industries like the ethanol production. And this is interesting for us because, well, first, ethanol production can ripple out into other areas of renewable energy. But I would like you to tell us, please, not only how you envision your company's role evolving in the next decade, but about the distinction, and importantly, the distinction between the corn-based ethanol and the sugarcane-based ethanol here in Brazil. Because as far as I'm concerned, this is relatively recent for us here in Brazil, at least for those of us who live in São Paulo, the São Paulo state, because ethanol here is traditionally primarily produced from sugarcane.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, and in fact, that was what inspired me in the early days.
Yes, and I was surprised to know about the corn production, and it was all the other possibilities that are involved in corn.
Yeah, gosh, I could probably speak for quite some time on that subject. But I think maybe a few things that I kind of see connecting Brazil and the US is, one, you learn from each other. So US corn ethanol was very much inspired by Brazilian sugarcane growth. So Brazil kind of, expanded in the 70s or really kind of began its journey for ethanol for fuel in the 70s. And that kind of really inspired the US when they started to develop its industry in the 90s and in the early 2000s. And now the world is smaller, people learn from each other. So you still have a burgeoning sugarcane industry in Brazil, which will keep growing. But one of the challenges with sugarcane ethanol is that you don't run the plant all year round. You only run during the harvest season. So you're running about 2/3 of the year, and 1/3 your plant is idle. And anybody running a business, that's like not good, because you're not making your product and selling your product during a third of the year. Whereas with corn, you can store corn. So you can have a big silo and kind of store the corn, and then you can run your plant all year round. So what's fascinating in Brazil right now is that that kind of the trailblazers in the early stages of corn, especially in Mato Grosso, realized one, there's an abundance of corn, and how do we make money from it? Two, look at what they're doing in the US, and they run all year round. So they run over 350 days, which I think has always been a little bit of a frustration to Brazilian ethanol producers when they see their American kind of cousins still running when they're into harvest. So when you kind of combine the ability to think, okay, well, if I've got enough bagasse from my sugarcane left over at the end of the harvest, I now have my fuel, if you like. And if I have corn as feedstock, I could still run my plant based on corn during the inter-harvest season. So that I think inspired certain producers to think a bit more laterally. So now we have quite a variety of development in Brazil, where you've still got the traditional sugarcane ethanol mills. You've got mills that are only corn, that are relatively new, and then which are using they're buying bagasse or they're using eucalyptus, woody biomass to run their facilities. And then you've got this movement towards flex. Is there a possibility of combining in one plant the ability to combine the best of sugarcane and the best of corn? So I think it's really exciting to see the amount of growth both in the corn ethanol in Brazil as well as sugarcane, and now we see them influencing each other. So I think traditionally there was probably both markets felt that they were better than each other, and a slight rivalry. But I think the beauty of an international world is, well, right, use the best of both. There's technology in corn that's different to cane, and if you are open-minded, you can think, well, how can I leverage what is a better way of running my facility to be more cost-effective, reduce my carbon footprint, reduce my water score, improve the way I make the ethanol. So I think we're at quite a rich period now where there'll be transfer of knowledge and more openness to engage in different ways of doing things. And related to that, we're also seeing in parallel ethanol being used as a feedstock to be used for sustainable aviation fuel, green chemicals. And Brazil has been a leader in green chemicals because you've got Braskem that's been making polyethylene from sugarcane for many years. So I'm really excited for the next kind of 10, 20 years as we'll see, ethanol is carbon basically. So very similar, well, different, but similar to a fossil, to oil, if you like, in terms of having carbon molecules. So nothing other than good technology really stops you from making all sorts of other carbon-derived products that we're used to using a barrel of oil today, but from ethanol. So the ethanol industry, I think, is at the beginning of a really exciting period of growth and development as it looks to make new products from either a stick of sugar cane, or a kernel of corn.
Yes. Oh, that's fascinating. And you spoke about Brazil. And do you plan on expanding operations to Brazil? I mean, other than serving customers here, do you view, and what about M&A operations and as a market strategy, perhaps, I don't know, or you are more organic focused?
So Brazil has always been very much part of my personal journey.
Yes, tell us about that.
We have local representatives in Brazil, but we are at the moment exploring setting up a Brazilian Whitefox company. So early stages of that. It takes a little bit of time. But hopefully this time next year we'll have a Brazilian company and start to grow our team. But we very much are a company that also has grown through partnerships. So we don't try and do it all ourselves. So we are already engaged with some Brazilian companies from a partnering perspective. When it comes to M&A, very early days to say that, but we're certainly open to it if that's what would help us grow more effectively in Brazil. We'll certainly be open to it. But at the moment, it's very much through partnering with local companies. And our objective will be to produce as much as possible of our solutions in Brazil. So from a manufacturing and fabrication perspective, we'll be producing everything in Brazil except for the membrane, which we will import from Europe.
Yeah, the main brain. Okay, not here. Okay. And well, so what about any advice or for aspiring leaders? And because looking back at your career journey, what would you say? What advice would you give to young lawyers or professionals who aspire to move into leadership roles in industry beyond law? Because that's incredibly motivating.
I think firstly, I'd say make sure that you are open-minded and don't create your own barriers. I think it's very common that we say, well, I'm a lawyer, so I can't be an entrepreneur. Why? That's just an artificial block, which is often mentally or third party. Other people might say that to you. So I think that's probably the most important thing, is be open. If it's something that you find you kind of awakens passion inside of you and you feel your entrepreneurial spirit is there, why wouldn't you be able to do it? So don't create your own barriers. Be open-minded. Speak to people. You'll be incredibly surprised at, well, you're not incredibly surprised, but you'll find that any entrepreneur will be delighted to spend some time talking to you. So if you sort of want to understand more, ask people for half an hour of their time. I think most people, confronted or not confronted, but if somebody comes to me with enthusiasm and they want to understand, I'll have coffee with them and share my thoughts. So speak to different people, you'll get different perspectives. And yeah, don't let artificial barriers get in the way.
Wow. Yeah. And yes, such a
and maybe the final thing just to say is that, often I used to hear it in the early days when I was a CEO, is like, how does a lawyer become a CEO? What does a lawyer know about being a CEO? Yes. And I think now having been a CEO, I'd say, wow, a lawyer is a fantastic position to be a CEO, because you're great at listening, at asking questions, curious. And often, depending on your legal background, you might be used to making deals. As a lawyer, you're as a CEO, that's one of the key things you're doing. Yes. Thinking about risk, as you mentioned earlier, assessing risk. In our company, intellectual property is very important to us. So obviously, that's got a lot of legal aspects around it. NDAs, contracts, employment, every aspect of running a business has a legal aspect around it. And so just the legal training, I think, puts you in a very strong position to become a CEO. And the aspects that you don't know, in my case, engineering, or maybe you're not so strong on finance, I think those are very good areas where you can learn, as opposed to, it's more difficult maybe to learn to become a lawyer from an engineering background.
For sure.
And my job is never to be the engineer in the room, but to understand enough about the technology. So
really wise. Yeah.
Don't let the barriers get in your way, and realize that law is actually a fantastic background to becoming a CEO.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's such a powerful message. It's a reminder that stepping out of traditional roles can lead to exciting new challenges. And your career really highlights that lawyers can thrive in so many different industries. And for young professionals, it must be reassuring to know that skills from law can be such a strong foundation for leadership in other industries. Oh, Gillian, it was truly a joy to have this conversation with you. I'm so grateful for the opportunity to chat with you. It's been fantastic. Thank you so much. And it's great to hear about your fascinating career path and what you navigated through, the challenges of moving from law into such a cutting edge industry. I'm sure our viewers, particularly those who are considering changing paths themselves, will find your story incredibly inspiring. And your success shows just how valuable a legal background can be, even in highly technical and innovation-driven fields like energy.
Thank you, Marina. It's been an absolute pleasure. And congratulations to the association, 150 years.
Yes. And in November next month.
Okay.
We are preparing
Fantastic.
lots of celebrations.
It's a great initiative with the podcast, so I look forward to listening to some of them myself.
Oh, thank you. And I'm looking forward to having you here again sometime in the future.
I look forward to seeing you in São Paulo soon. Take care.
Oh, great, great. Thank you. So to everyone listening today, I hope you've learned as much as I have from Gillian's journey. It's been a truly enlightening conversation, and I'm sure you all take away some great insights on leadership, sustainability, and the importance of balancing law with technology. Thank you all for tuning in, and I look forward to seeing you in our next episode of The Global Lawyer. And until then, stay curious, keep pushing boundaries, and remember, there's always a new path to explore. See you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.